Well, we're going to look at our final chapter in Luke's Gospel now, Luke chapter 23, so if you want to turn to that. And we're going to look at two more characters. We've already looked at the disciples and we've looked at Barabbas, but in these verses we see two more people mentioned that both have a significant part in the story of Good Friday. So chapter 23, verse 26. As they led him away, they seized Simon of Cyrene, who was on his way in from the country, and put the cross on him and made him carry it behind Jesus. A large number of people followed him, including women who mourned and wailed for him. Just those two verses there. Who was Simon of Cyrene? Where did he come from? Well, we're told he was coming in from the country, from Cyrene. Now, that is a city in northern Africa, today's Libya. So maybe we're told this detail just to help us realise that the whole world is part of this story, that we're all welcomed in, we all have a part in the story of the cross. It's for all of us. But I don't think this is a detail that's added, it's not made up, this is factual, this is real, this is what happened. So Simon of Cyrene, yes, from another part of the world, was on his way in from the country, and suddenly the cross is put on his back and he's made to carry the cross behind Jesus. Now, earlier on in Luke's Gospel, Jesus had told the disciples to be his disciple you need to take up your cross and follow him. And here we see that lived out practically in the most horrendous way. Simon suddenly forced to carry a cross behind Jesus and follow him. So maybe this is a picture of what it is for us to follow Jesus and bear our cross as we walk with him. But why did the soldiers make Simon carry the cross? Were they showing compassion to Jesus? Could they see he was weak and wanting to help him up the hill? Or were they filled with a lust for more blood, a desire to please the Roman Empire and can carry out their duties and make sure Jesus survived to the cross, that he would have to go through that agony? Some might think it's compassion to help Jesus. Others would say no, it meant him having to go through the agony of being nailed to those pieces of wood and put on the cross. But what we can see is, again, God had his plan to use others, but to also make sure that Jesus would fulfill his mission to die on behalf of all of us. I'm glad we're told of Simon of Cyrene, because we are all called to play our part in God's story. And we're all called to recognise that Jesus was to go to the cross for us. It was an intentional part of God's plan to save us. But the question is, are we ready? Are we ready to bear the cross that God gives us? Are we ready to take the burden that he has for us as individuals? Simon of Cyrene is suddenly, almost randomly called to carry the cross. God can use us at any moment in our lives. Why don't you just pause for a moment and consider, are you ready to do what God asks you to do, to play your part? Let's pick up the story from verse 32. Two other men, both criminals, were also led out with him to be executed. When they came to the place called the Skull, there they crucified him, along with the criminals, one on his right, the other on his left. Jesus said, "Father, forgive them, for they do not know what they are doing." And they divided up his clothes by casting lots. The people stood watching, and the rulers even sneered at him. They said, "He saved others. Let him save himself if he is the Christ of God, the chosen one." The soldiers also came up and mocked him. They offered him wine vinegar and said, "If you are the king of the Jews, save yourself." There was written a notice above him, which read, "This is the King of the Jews." One of the criminals who hung there hurled insults at him. "Aren't you the Christ? Save yourself and us." But the other criminal rebuked him. "Do you not fear God?" he said, "since you are under the same sentence? We are punished justly, for we are getting what our deeds deserve. But this man has done nothing wrong." Then he said, "Jesus, remember me when you come into your kingdom." Jesus answered him, "I tell you the truth, today you'll be with me in paradise." What an incredible account of what happened as Jesus was being put to death on the cross, along with two other criminals. What contrast in their response to him, while the crowd stand watching the spectacle, being spectators, there on the cross of these two men. One of them, incredibly, sees in Jesus that he is the King of the Jews, that the sign above his head is really true. And he calls out to Jesus, "Remember me." But before he asks Jesus to remember him, he shows us that he's really understood something of how we are, of who we are. He says to the other criminal, "Do you not fear God, even at the end? We're getting what we deserve, but he's innocent." The thief on the cross recognised that he was worthy of death, that he was guilty and was only getting what he deserved. And he also recognised the innocence of Jesus. I wonder if we recognise the difference between us and Christ. Most bystanders haven't got a clue what is really going on, but this thief recognises his own weakness. He recognises his own guilt, and he calls out to the King on the cross next to him to have mercy and remember him. Jesus, who has just called out, "Father, forgive them, for they don't know what they're doing," his prayer is answered almost immediately by the thief next to him, who sees he can be forgiven if he turns to Christ. D.L. Moody, a great American evangelist, says about the thief on the cross, "The thief had nails through both hands, so he could not work, and a nail through each foot, so that he could not run errands for the Lord. He could not lift a hand or a foot towards his salvation, and yet Christ offered him the gift of God, and he took it. Christ threw him a passport and took him into paradise." We don't need to lift a hand to earn our salvation, not to earn it. We just need to call out to Jesus and thank him that even when we're aware of such guilt inside, even when our lives fall far short of the glory of God and the life Jesus lived, he offers us life because of his own grace and goodness to us. The thief fears God, we're told, and wants to be part of Jesus' kingdom. What would it mean for us, for you, to fear God like that and to want to be part of his story, to be part of the eternal kingdom? The fact is that thief's circumstances, his situation was hopeless. And yet with Jesus, it was turned upside down. He was given hope and the promise of life. So what about you? Are you just a spectator today? Or do you want to be part of God's kingdom? You're not called to be a spectator, but to be part of Jesus' story. His death was for you, and it was for me. Why don't you reflect on that now? And I suggest you listen to a great song by Lauren Daigle called Rebel Heart, and maybe make this a prayer and a commitment to Jesus.